You are dead to us. My husband and in-laws said when I couldn't give them a child. They threw me out with nothing but a suitcase. I stayed silent, until 4 years later when I emerged from a private jet, with my 2-year-old son and a handsome man. Their jaws dropped. Their pride shattered silently. My name is Sarah, and 4 years ago my mother-in-law Charlotte looked me dead in the eye and said, "A woman without a child is like a tree without fruit." She was handing me my suitcase at the time, kicking me out of the only home I'd known as a married woman. But let me take you back to where it all began to crumble. I was sitting in Dr. Rodriguez's office, gripping Jordan's hand so tight my knuckles had turned white. The test results lay between us on the mahogany desk like a death sentence. Jordan's jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the wall behind the doctor's head. "I'm sorry," Dr. Rodriguez said gently. "The tests show significant fertility challenges. Conception will be extremely difficult, though not impossible." Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing stories of resilience and transformation. If you believe every woman deserves a second chance to rebuild her life, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need hope. Now let's see how I survived. The drive home was silent except for the hum of Jordan's BMW engine. When we pulled into the circular driveway of his family's estate, I could see Charlotte and Amanda through the kitchen window, their heads bent together in conversation. They looked up expectantly as we walked through the door. "Well," Charlotte's voice was sharp with anticipation. "What did the doctor say?" Jordan loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch before answering. "It's going to be more complicated than we thought." Amanda set down her teacup with a delicate clink. "What does that mean exactly?" I opened my mouth to explain, but Jordan spoke first. "Sarah has some issues that make pregnancy unlikely." Issues? As if I was a broken appliance that needed fixing. Charlotte's face went through a series of expressions: disappointment, frustration, and finally something that looked almost like disgust. "I see. Well, there are always options, aren't there? Specialists, treatments." "We're going to explore everything," I said quietly, finding my voice. But Charlotte had already turned away, busying herself with rearranging the flowers on the counter. The conversation was over for her, but I could feel the judgment settling around me like a heavy blanket. That night Jordan and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The silence stretched between us until I couldn't bear it anymore. "We'll figure this out," I whispered. "There are treatments, procedures." "Sarah." His voice was tired, distant. "Let's just see what happens." What happened was 18 months of monthly disappointments. 18 months of negative pregnancy tests that I hid in the bottom of bathroom trash cans. 18 months of Charlotte's increasingly pointed comments about our childless state. "My friend Eleanor's daughter-in-law just had twins," she announced one morning over breakfast. "Such a blessing. Eleanor feels so fulfilled as a grandmother." Amanda nodded enthusiastically. "I can't wait to have children. I think I'll be pregnant within 6 months of getting married." I pushed eggs around my plate, my appetite gone. These breakfast conversations had become a special kind of torture, designed to remind me of my failure without anyone having to say it directly. Jordan stopped coming to doctor appointments after the 8th month. "I have a conference call," he'd say, or, "The office needs me." Always something more important than figuring out why his wife couldn't give him the family he wanted. I started going alone, sitting in waiting rooms full of pregnant women, feeling like an imposter among the truly fertile. Dr. Rodriguez was kind but realistic. Each treatment was more invasive, more expensive, more likely to fail than the last. "Maybe we should consider adoption," I suggested one evening as Jordan reviewed business papers at the kitchen table. He didn't look up. "My mother wants biological grandchildren. You know how she feels about bloodlines." Bloodlines. As if we were breeding horses instead of trying to build a family. The final straw came on a Tuesday in March. I'd been feeling nauseous for 3 days and allowed myself the dangerous luxury of hope. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work and locked myself in our bathroom, hands shaking as I waited for the results. Negative. I sat on the bathroom floor and finally let myself cry. Not the quiet, dignified tears I usually allowed, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. When I finally composed myself and came downstairs, I found Jordan in his study with papers spread across his desk. "Divorce papers. How long have you been planning this?" I asked, picking up the documents with numb fingers. Jordan finally looked up, his expression almost relieved. Sarah, we both know this isn't working. We want different things. We want the same thing. We want a family. I want a family that's actually possible. The prenup was attached to the divorce papers, highlighted in yellow marker. Every clause that protected the Harrison family wealth, every line that left me with nothing if our marriage failed. I remembered signing it 3 years earlier, young and in love and certain we'd never need it. I was 25, I said, staring at my own signature. I thought love would be enough. Love doesn't pay bills or carry on family names. Charlotte appeared in the doorway as if she'd been listening. Sarah, dear, I think it's best if you pack your things tonight. Amanda can drive you wherever you need to go. I looked at Jordan, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his mother she was overstepping. Instead, he gathered the papers and slipped them into a folder. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the details, he said without meeting my eyes. I packed one suitcase that night while Charlotte supervised from the doorway. 3 years of marriage reduced to clothes that would fit in a carry-on bag. You're young, Charlotte said as I folded my wedding dress into tissue paper. You'll find someone else. Someone better suited to your limitations. Amanda appeared with my coat and purse. The taxi's here. I walked through the house one last time, past the dining room where I'd hosted dinner parties, past the living room where I'd spent countless evenings feeling like an outsider. Jordan was nowhere to be seen. At the front door, Charlotte handed me my suitcase and $23 from her purse. For the taxi, she said. You'll understand someday. A woman who can't give her husband children is incomplete. Jordan deserves better. I climbed into the taxi with no destination in mind and no idea how I was going to survive. As we pulled away from the estate, I pressed my face to the window and watched the only life I'd known disappear behind perfectly manicured hedges. The driver caught my eyes in the rearview mirror. Where to, miss? I had no answer. I had no home, no money, no plan. But as we drove through the city, something hard and determined began forming in my chest. They'd thrown me away like garbage, dismissed me as worthless. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. The taxi dropped me off at a motel on the outskirts of downtown. $43 for 3 nights in a room that smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. I sat on the scratchy bedspread and stared at my suitcase, wondering how my life had shrunk to fit inside one small bag. The next morning, I walked into Martinez Dry Cleaning with my only business outfit and asked for work. The owner, Mrs. Martinez, looked me up and down with tired eyes. You ever worked retail before? I lied. Yes. She handed me an apron that had seen better days. $6 an hour, cash only. You start now. The first customer handed me a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent at Jordan's house. My hands trembled as I tagged it, remembering how I used to organize entire walk-in closets full of clothes just like this one. The customer barely looked at me, treating me like part of the machinery. During my break, I locked myself in the tiny employee bathroom and sobbed into a paper towel. But when the bell rang for customers, I wiped my face and smiled like nothing had happened. That night, I found a studio apartment for $300 a month. The landlord, Mr. Chin, was suspicious of my lack of references until I offered 2 months upfront in cash. The apartment had a leaky faucet, a window that wouldn't close properly, and a radiator that clanged all night. But it was mine. I bought a mattress from a thrift store and dragged it up 3 flights of stairs myself. The previous tenant had left behind a dented kettle and a single fork. I ate instant noodles for dinner, sitting cross-legged on the floor, telling myself this was temporary. But temporary stretched into weeks, then months. The dry cleaner barely covered rent and food. Some nights I went to bed hungry rather than spend my last few dollars. I told myself stories in the dark, imagining what I'd say to Charlotte if I ever saw her again. You're not done yet, I whispered to the cracked ceiling. They don't get the final word. Mrs. Martinez noticed I never took sick days and always stayed late to help with the books. You're too smart for this place, she told me one evening as we closed up. Why are you here? I couldn't tell her about Jordan, about the prenup, about being thrown away like trash. So I just said, starting over. She nodded like she understood and slipped me an extra 20. For groceries. 3 months later, I saw a help wanted sign at Page Turner Books. The owner, an elderly woman named Helen, hired me for morning shifts after I proved I could alphabetize faster than her current employee. $6 more an hour, plus I could read during slow periods. But 6 plus 6 still wasn't enough. I found evening work cleaning office buildings downtown. The cleaning company didn't ask questions, just handed me keys and pointed to supply closets. I'd work until midnight, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash bins, then catch a few hours of sleep before my bookstore shift. Weekends I picked up catering gigs through a temp agency, serving champagne to people who looked exactly like Jordan's friends, people who didn't see me even when I stood right in front of them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was invisible to the same social class that had once claimed me as their own. One Saturday I was serving at a corporate event when I overheard two women discussing their nannies' salaries. They were complaining about paying $800 a week for childcare. I bit my tongue and refilled their wine glasses, calculating that they spent more on babysitting than I made in a month. The juggling act nearly broke me. I'd fall asleep standing up in the bookstore, wake up with book spine imprints on my cheek. Helen started leaving me energy bars and coffee without saying anything. These small kindnesses kept me going when everything else felt impossible. My luck changed on a Tuesday morning when I spilled coffee on myself rushing between jobs. I ducked into a corner deli to clean up and bumped into a man reviewing spreadsheets at a back table. Sarah? Sarah Mitchell? I looked up, surprised anyone remembered my maiden name. The man was about 50 with kind eyes and graying temples. Took me a moment to place him. Raj Patel. I couldn't believe it. From Maple Street? He stood up, smiling broadly. I thought that was you. What are the odds? Raj had lived 3 houses down from my childhood home. His mother, Mrs. Patel, used to give me homemade samosas when I walked past their garden. I remembered the day she'd fallen on their front steps. I was 16 and helped her inside, stayed with her until Raj got home from college. You helped my mother that day she fell, he said as if reading my thoughts. She never forgot that kindness. We talked for 20 minutes. He owned a small logistics company now, had built it from nothing after immigrating 15 years ago. When I mentioned I was between opportunities, his expression grew thoughtful. I'm actually looking for an operations manager. Someone who can handle details, work with difficult people, think on their feet. The pay is decent and there's room to grow. I almost laughed. Raj, I work in a dry cleaner and a bookstore. I clean offices at night. I don't know anything about logistics. But you know about people. You know about working hard. And you know about starting over. He pulled out a business card. Come in Monday morning. Let's see what you can do. That weekend I researched everything I could about logistics and supply chain management. I borrowed business books from Helen and read until my eyes burned. Monday morning I walked into Patel Logistics wearing my only professional outfit, the same one I'd worn to the dry cleaner 6 months ago. The office was small but organized, with 3 employees handling client accounts. Raj introduced me to the team and gave me a desk near the window. For the first time in months, I had a place that felt like it could become something. Start with these client files, he said, handing me a stack of folders. Learn the accounts, figure out where we can improve efficiency. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I threw myself into the work with desperate determination. Every report I wrote, every client call I handled, every process I streamlined, it felt like proof that I was more than what Charlotte had called me. More than a barren woman. More than a failure. The other employees, Maria and David, were initially skeptical of the boss's new hire. But when I reorganized the filing system and created a tracking spreadsheet that saved them hours each week, they started coming to me with questions and ideas. For the first time since leaving Jordan's house, I felt useful. Valuable. Like I might actually have a future that didn't involve counting quarters for grocery money. 3 months into the job, Raj called me into his office. You've increased our efficiency by 30%, he said, sliding an envelope across his desk. This is your new salary. The number inside made my hands shake. It was more than I'd made at all 3 of my previous jobs combined. Enough to move to a better apartment, buy real furniture, eat actual meals instead of instant noodles. That night, I sat on my floor mattress one last time and allowed myself to believe something I hadn't dared hope for in months. Maybe I really wasn't done yet. 6 months into my job at Patel Logistics, I was eating lunch at my desk when Maria mentioned her side investment in cryptocurrency. Made $300 last month just sitting on my phone, she said casually, scrolling through charts. Something clicked. I'd been so focused on surviving paycheck to paycheck that I'd never considered making my money work for me. That evening, I signed up for an online finance course and spent my first Saturday in months doing something other than laundry and grocery shopping. The instructor, a woman named Dr. Angela Chin, spoke about compound interest like it was magic. Your money should have babies, she said during one video lecture. And those babies should have babies. I started small, investing $50 from each paycheck into index funds. Then I discovered a business strategy course taught by a venture capitalist who'd built 3 companies from scratch. I watched his lectures during lunch breaks, taking notes in the margins of recycled paper. The difference between the wealthy and everyone else, he explained, isn't how much they make. It's how much they keep and grow. I began seeing everything differently. When Raj mentioned losing a major client to poor communication, I didn't just fix the immediate problem. I designed a whole new client retention system. When our delivery tracking broke down, I researched software solutions and presented 3 options with cost-benefit analyses. Where did you learn all this? Raj asked after I'd streamlined our entire invoicing process. YouTube University, I said, only half joking. My first real breakthrough came when I noticed patterns in our shipping data. Certain routes consistently ran over budget while others came in under. I spent 2 weeks building a predictive model and presented it to Raj on a Tuesday morning. This could save us $40,000 a year, he said, staring at my spreadsheets. Sarah, this is brilliant. That afternoon he handed me an envelope with a $5,000 bonus. I stared at the check for a full minute before carefully folding it into my wallet. Instead of spending it on furniture or a vacation, I researched emerging technology companies. There was this startup called Green Tech Solutions developing solar panel efficiency software. The risk made my stomach churn. Losing $5,000 would set me back months. But something about their business model felt right. I bought shares on a Wednesday morning, hands shaking as I clicked confirm purchase. 3 months later, Green Tech announced a partnership with a major energy company. My investment doubled overnight. I reinvested everything, this time spreading it across 5 different startups. 1 failed completely, 2 broke even, but the other 2 soared. By my first anniversary at Patel Logistics, my portfolio was worth $23,000. You look different, Maria observed one morning. More confident or something. He was right. I'd stopped checking my bank account with dread and started checking my investment app with anticipation. Numbers that used to terrify me now excited me. I was learning their language, understanding their patterns. Raj promoted me to senior operations manager with a salary increase that finally let me move to a 1-bedroom apartment with actual furniture. But instead of upgrading my lifestyle dramatically, I maintained my modest spending and funneled the extra income into investments. The real game changer came when I discovered angel investing networks. These were groups of accredited investors who pooled money to fund early-stage companies. The minimum investment was $50,000, more than I'd ever imagined having. But I'd been studying the market for over a year now. I'd learned to read financial statements, analyze business models, and spot promising trends. When a biotech company developing breakthrough fertility treatments came across my desk, I knew this was my moment. I liquidated half my portfolio and joined the investment round. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, funding the exact type of medical advancement that might have saved my marriage. But this wasn't about the past anymore. This was about building something bigger than my pain. The biotech investment took 18 months to mature, but when it did, my $50,000 stake became $200,000. I was learning that wealth wasn't just about working harder. It was about positioning yourself in the path of other people's success. My portfolio crossed $500,000 on a rainy Thursday. I was reviewing quarterly reports when the notification popped up on my phone. For a moment, I just sat there, remembering the woman who'd eaten instant noodles on a floor mattress 2 years ago. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done since my divorce. I went shopping for pleasure instead of necessity. There was a boutique downtown I'd walked past countless times, admiring the leather handbags in the window but never daring to go inside. The saleswoman looked at me skeptically when I walked in wearing jeans and sneakers. But when I pointed to a caramel-colored leather bag and said, "I'll take that one," her attitude shifted immediately. "Excellent choice," she said, carefully wrapping it in tissue paper. "Will this be cash or card?" "Card," I said, handing over my credit card without checking the price tag. Walking out of that boutique with my first luxury purchase felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd thought was lost forever. It wasn't about the bag. It was about being someone who could buy beautiful things without counting pennies or asking permission. My millionaire moment happened on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing my portfolio over coffee. The tech sector had surged overnight, and my investments had crossed seven figures while I slept. $1,043,712. I stared at the screen, heart pounding so loud I was sure the entire coffee shop could hear it. I didn't scream or dance or call anyone. I simply whispered, "You should have never let me go," and closed my laptop. That afternoon I made my boldest move yet. I'd been researching private aviation companies and discovered I could buy shares in a jet management firm. The investment was substantial, $400,000, but it came with usage rights. As I signed the paperwork, I thought about Charlotte's face when she'd handed me that suitcase. About Jordan's relief when he'd served me divorce papers. About Amanda's smug smile as she'd called the taxi. They'd thrown me away thinking I was worthless. Now I was literally buying pieces of the sky. The flight coordinator called 2 weeks later to schedule my first trip. "Where would you like to go, Ms. Mitchell?" I looked out my apartment window at the city where I'd rebuilt my life from nothing. "Anywhere I want," I said. And for the first time in years that was exactly true. But having all the freedom in the world meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. 3 years into my financial success, I realized I'd become excellent at building wealth but terrible at building connections. My evenings were spent alone, reviewing investment portfolios and planning my next business move. It was during this period of loneliness that I decided to take a step back from the corporate consulting work I'd been doing and try something completely different. I wanted to remember what it felt like to serve people directly, to have simple human interactions that weren't about profit margins or market trends. Café Luna was a small neighborhood spot with mismatched chairs and local art covering the walls. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, hired me for weekend shifts after I admitted I had no restaurant experience but needed to reconnect with real people. "You seem like someone who's forgotten how to just be," she said, tying an apron around my waist. "This place will teach you." My first Saturday shift was chaos. I mixed up orders, spilled coffee on myself twice, and couldn't figure out the espresso machine. But there was something liberating about failing at something so completely unrelated to my business success. That's when I noticed him. Christian sat at the corner table every Saturday morning, reading different books and nursing the same order: black coffee and a blueberry muffin. He was probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes and hands that moved gently when he turned pages. What struck me most was how he really looked at people. Not through them or past them but at them. He noticed details that others missed. Like how I always wore the same comfortable black shoes because my feet hurt from years of standing. Or how my smile got tighter as the morning rush intensified. When I'd mess up his order, which happened more often than I'd like to admit, he'd just smile and say, "No worries. I'm not in any hurry." The third Saturday he asked my name. "Sarah," I said, refilling his coffee. "I'm Christian. And thank you." "For the coffee?" "For working so hard to make everyone's morning better. Even when you're clearly exhausted." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. It had been so long since someone noticed my effort rather than just my results. Over the following weeks, our conversations grew longer. He was a social worker at a children's center, helping kids navigate family crisis situations. He had this way of listening that made you feel heard, not judged. "You seem sad sometimes," he said one morning when the cafe was quiet. "Like you're carrying something heavy." I almost brushed off his observation, but something about his genuine concern made me pause. Some baggage from my past. Nothing too dramatic. Baggage usually feels dramatic to the person carrying it. After my shifts, Christian started waiting for me. We'd walk to the park across the street and sit on the bench talking about everything except my money or his work. He told me about growing up in foster care, about learning to find family in unexpected places. I told him about my childhood dreams of being a teacher, about how I'd wanted to help children learn to read. "What changed?" he asked. "Life," I said simply. One evening, as autumn turned the leaves golden, I found myself telling him everything. About Jordan and the fertility struggles. About Charlotte's cruelty and the prenup that left me with nothing. About sleeping on a floor mattress and eating instant noodles for months. Christian listened without interrupting, without trying to offer solutions or empty comfort. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry that happened to you, he said finally. But I need you to know something. You're not broken. You're not incomplete. You're actually one of the strongest people I've ever met. I felt tears threatening and looked away. You don't understand. I couldn't give him what he wanted. I failed at the most basic thing women are supposed to do. Sarah. His voice was firm but gentle. Look at me. I turned to face him expecting pity. Instead I saw admiration. You survived being thrown away by people who were supposed to love you. You built a life from nothing. You chose kindness over bitterness. That's not failure. That's extraordinary. Something inside me shifted that night. For the first time since my divorce, I felt seen for who I actually was, not who I couldn't be. Our relationship grew slowly, carefully. Christian never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He never asked about my finances or seemed impressed when I mentioned my business success. He was interested in Sarah the person, not Sarah the portfolio. We started cooking dinner together at his small apartment. He taught me how to make fresh pasta, and I showed him my grandmother's recipe for apple pie. These simple domestic moments felt more intimate than anything I'd shared with Jordan. 8 months after our first conversation, Christian proposed during one of our evening walks. Not with a flashy ring or grand gesture but with honesty. I love who you are when you're with me, he said, stopping beside the fountain where we'd shared so many conversations. I love who I am when I'm with you. We're both better together. The ring was simple, elegant, and clearly chosen with thought rather than to impress anyone else. Yes, I said before he could even ask the question properly. We married 6 months later in a simple ceremony at the courthouse. I wore a cream-colored dress from a local boutique, and Christian wore his best suit. Mrs. Rodriguez was our witness, crying happy tears as she signed the papers. No prenup? The officiant asked, reviewing our documents. Christian and I looked at each other and laughed. No prenup, I said. We're in this together. After the ceremony, we had dinner at Café Luna. Mrs. Rodriguez had closed early and cooked for us personally. It was perfect in its simplicity. The miracle came 14 months later. I was reviewing quarterly reports when nausea hit me, so suddenly I had to run to the bathroom. The pregnancy test I bought that afternoon showed 2 pink lines. I stared at it in disbelief, remembering all those negative tests from years before. This time felt different. This time felt like hope instead of desperation. When Christian came home from work, I was sitting on our couch, still holding the test. Sarah? What's wrong? I handed him the test without saying anything. His face went through confusion, recognition, and then pure joy. Are you sure? He whispered. As sure as these things can be. Christian sat beside me and pulled me close. We both cried, tears of amazement, of gratitude, of disbelief that something so wanted could actually happen. 9 months later, I held my son in my arms. Thomas Christian Mitchell, named for his father and carrying my maiden name by choice. He was perfect, healthy, and completely ours. As Christian wept beside my hospital bed, I thought about Charlotte's words from years ago. About being a tree without fruit, incomplete and worthless. Now I was a mother, but more importantly, I was a woman who'd learned her worth wasn't determined by anyone else's expectations. Somewhere across the city, I imagined Charlotte choking on her morning tea if she ever found out. But honestly, I was too happy to care. Thomas was 18 months old and taking his first wobbly steps around our living room when the unexpected message arrived. I was checking emails while he played with wooden blocks when I saw Amanda Harrison's name in my inbox. My breath caught. I hadn't heard from anyone in Jordan's family for over 4 years. The subject line read, Invitation, Women's Leadership Gala, Exclusive Guest List. I opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Ms. Mitchell, your company Mitchell Strategic Consulting has been recommended as a rising force in business leadership. We would be honored to have you attend our annual charity gala supporting women's entrepreneurship. This exclusive event brings together the city's most influential female leaders. Please confirm your attendance at your earliest convenience. Amanda Harrison, event chair. She had no idea who she was inviting. My consulting firm had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. After Thomas was born, I'd transitioned from investments to helping other women build their businesses. My client roster included tech entrepreneurs, medical professionals, and retail innovators. Amanda must have seen my company's recent feature in Business Weekly about female-led firms making 7-figure impacts. I stared at the email for a full minute, my heart racing. The gala was being held at the Harrison estate, the same house where I'd been thrown out with a suitcase. The same driveway where Charlotte had handed me $23 for taxi fare. Christian walked into the room fresh from putting Thomas down for his nap. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I showed him the email. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "You don't have to go," he said gently, sitting beside me on the couch. "I know." I read the invitation again. "But maybe I want to." That evening, after Thomas was asleep, Christian and I talked through what this meant. He never tried to talk me out of it or suggest I was looking for trouble. He just listened as I worked through my feelings. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, curled against his shoulder. "That's what surprises me. I should be furious, but I just feel curious. Like, what would it be like to walk back into that world as someone completely different?" "You are someone completely different," Christian said. "The question is whether they deserve to meet her." I spent 3 days deciding, then sent my RSVP, delighted to attend. "I'll be bringing my family." The week before the gala, I made careful preparations. I arranged for my private jet share, selected a midnight blue silk dress that made me feel powerful and elegant, and had my assistant coordinate all the logistics. Most importantly, I made sure Christian was comfortable with the plan. "Are you sure you want to bring Thomas?" I asked as we reviewed the evening's schedule. Christian smiled, bouncing our son on his knee. "This little guy is living proof that you're exactly who you're supposed to be. If we're doing this, we're doing it as a family." The night of the gala, our driver picked us up in a sleek black car that would take us to the private airfield. Thomas babbled happily in his car seat, dressed in a tiny navy suit that matched his father's. I wore my hair in an elegant updo and kept my jewelry simple but expensive. Diamond earrings that caught the light beautifully. As our jet descended toward the city airport, I looked down at the lights below and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. This wasn't about revenge or proving anything. This was about showing up as the woman I'd become. The limousine from the airport pulled into the Harrison Estate's circular driveway at exactly 7 o'clock. Photographers were stationed along the entrance, capturing arriving guests for the society pages. I could see the house through the car windows, every light blazing just as it had been during my marriage. "Ready?" Christian asked, adjusting Thomas's bow tie. "Ready." Our driver opened the door and I stepped out first. Camera flashes immediately began popping as photographers realized they didn't recognize me but could tell from my arrival that I was someone important. Christian appeared beside me looking handsome and confident, then lifted Thomas from his car seat. We walked up the same stone steps where I'd once carried grocery bags as Jordan's wife. Now I was returning as myself, successful, loved, and complete. The moment we entered the foyer, I spotted Jordan across the room. He was talking to a group of men, gesturing with a cocktail glass, looking exactly the same except for some gray at his temples. He glanced toward the entrance casually, then did a double take that was almost comical. His face went completely pale. The glass slipped from his hand, though he caught it before it fell. I watched as his eyes moved from my face to Christian, then to Thomas, then back to me. The confusion and shock were written clearly across his features. He excused himself from his conversation and started walking toward us, his steps uncertain. "Sarah." His voice was barely audible above the party chatter. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Jordan." My voice was calm, friendly even. "I was invited. Amanda's building quite the impressive guest list." His eyes kept darting to Thomas, who was contentedly playing with Christian's tie. "Is that who is?" "This is my husband, Christian, and our son, Thomas." I made the introductions smoothly as if we were meeting at any normal social event. Christian extended his hand politely. "Nice to meet you, Jordan." Jordan shook it mechanically, still staring at Thomas with something between wonder and devastation. Before he could say anything else, Charlotte appeared at his shoulder. She'd aged in the past 4 years, her face showing the lines of someone who held too much tension. When she saw me, she stopped walking so abruptly that Amanda, following behind her, nearly collided with her back. "Sarah." Charlotte's voice came out as a whisper. Amanda's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and then something approaching horror as she realized what she'd done. "Hello, Charlotte," I said pleasantly. "What a lovely event. The decorations are beautiful." Charlotte opened her mouth but no words came out. She stared at Thomas, who chose that moment to giggle and reach his little hands toward the sparkling chandelier above us. Amanda recovered first, her face flushing red. I didn't realize. Your company name. Mitchell is my maiden name, I explained gently. I went back to it after my divorce. Less complicated for business. The silence stretched between us until Thomas started babbling, pointing at the flowers arranged throughout the foyer. The sound of his innocent joy seemed to break something in Charlotte's composure. How old is he? She asked quietly. 18 months, Christian answered, his voice warm with pride. I watched Charlotte do the math, watched her realize that I'd had the child she'd said I never could, with a man who clearly adored both of us. Hello, Charlotte, I said softly, adjusting Thomas's collar. How's the fruitless tree doing now? The reference to her cruel words from years ago hung in the air. Charlotte's face crumpled slightly, but she didn't respond. Amanda spilled her champagne down the front of her dress, the golden liquid spreading across the expensive fabric. She stared at the stain as if she couldn't understand how it had happened. Around us, the party continued. Other guests mingled and laughed, completely unaware of the small earthquake happening in their hosts' lives. I didn't need to say anything else. My presence, my happiness, my beautiful family. We were living proof that their judgment had been wrong. That their cruelty had failed to destroy me. I had become exactly who I was meant to be, and it had nothing to do with them at all. We stayed at the gala for exactly 2 hours. Long enough to make our point, short enough to avoid unnecessary drama. As we walked back to our limousine, Thomas sleeping peacefully in Christian's arms, I felt something I hadn't expected: complete closure. The drive to the airport was quiet. Christian held my hand while I processed what had just happened. When we boarded our jet, I looked back at the city lights one last time and realized something profound. I didn't need to see them again. Ever. That night as we flew home, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I was done looking backward. The next morning, I deleted Jordan's number from my phone. Not out of anger, but out of completion. I unfollowed Amanda and Charlotte on every social media platform. Not because I was hurt, but because their lives no longer interested me. For 4 years, I'd occasionally checked their updates, telling myself it was curiosity. Really, it was a habit left over from when their opinions mattered. They didn't matter anymore. Christian found me in the kitchen making breakfast, humming while I scrambled eggs. Thomas was in his high chair, happily throwing Cheerios on the floor. You seem different this morning, Christian observed, pouring coffee. Lighter somehow. I feel like I just put down a suitcase I'd been carrying for years, I said, kissing his cheek. I didn't even realize how heavy it was until I set it down. 3 months later, that feeling of freedom led to the most meaningful project of my life. I was reading a news article about the rise in divorce rates and the financial devastation many women faced afterward when an idea struck me. What if we started a foundation? I suggested to Christian that evening as we walked through our neighborhood. Something to help women rebuild after divorce. Christian stopped walking and turned to face me. Tell me more. So many women sign prenups like I did, or they sacrifice their careers for their marriages. When everything falls apart, they're left with nothing. What if we could give them the tools and resources to start over? Within 6 months, we'd established the Phoenix Foundation, named for the mythical bird that rises from ashes. Our mission was simple. Provide financial education, business mentorship, and emotional support to women rebuilding their lives after divorce. Our first client was Maria, a 38-year-old teacher whose husband had left her for his secretary. She came to our office with 2 young children and a checking account with $47. I don't know where to start, she said, tears streaming down her face. I haven't worked in 8 years. I don't even know how to write a resume anymore. I sat across from her, remembering my own $23 in single suitcase. You start exactly where you are, I told her, and we'll help you figure out the next step. 6 months later, Maria had completed our financial literacy program, secured a teaching position, and was saving money for the first time in her adult life. Watching her confidence grow reminded me why this work mattered so much. Thomas learned to walk in the foundation's offices. He'd toddle between conference rooms while I taught budgeting workshops or Christian facilitated support groups. Our staff became his extended family, and he became our mascot of hope, proof that beautiful things could grow from difficult beginnings. By Thomas's 2nd birthday, we'd helped over 200 women restart their lives. Each success story felt personal, like healing a wound I'd carried for years. Mama's story. Thomas demanded one evening, climbing into my lap with his favorite book. Instead of reading from the page, I found myself telling him stories I'd never planned to share. Stories about being strong when people are unkind. About how sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. About how setbacks can become setups for something better. You came to Mama and Daddy when we needed you most, I whispered, stroking his dark hair. You taught us that love creates its own miracles. Christian appeared in the doorway, smiling at us. Room for one more in that chair? As my boys snuggled around me, I thought about the woman I'd been 4 years ago. She was so focused on what she lacked that she couldn't see what she already had. So desperate for approval that she'd forgotten to approve of herself. The foundation grew, but so did our family in unexpected ways. We hired women from our program who'd rebuilt their careers. We created a mentorship network where program graduates helped newcomers. We established partnerships with divorce attorneys who referred clients who needed our services. One afternoon, while reviewing applications for our scholarship program, I came across a name that made me pause. Jennifer Harrison. Jordan's cousin, recently divorced and struggling to support her twin daughters. She'd applied using her maiden name, probably having no idea who was reviewing her paperwork. I called Christian into my office and showed him the application. What do you want to do? He asked. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Help her. Her children need their mother to be stable and confident. That's more important than old family drama. Jennifer became one of our most successful program participants. She never knew about my connection to her family, and I never told her. She didn't need that burden while she was rebuilding her life. 2 years later, at Thomas's 4th birthday party, I watched him playing in our backyard with children from our neighborhood and kids whose mothers had graduated from our foundation program. Christian was manning the grill, laughing with other fathers about the challenges of potty training and bedtime negotiations. This was success. Not the bank account numbers or the business accolades, though those were nice. The laughter, the community, the sense of belonging we'd created. This was everything I'd thought I wanted in my first marriage but had never found. That evening, after the guests had gone home and Thomas was asleep, I sat in our garden with a cup of tea. Christian joined me, carrying a piece of leftover birthday cake. Any regrets? He asked, settling beside me on our porch swing. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret the pain of my first marriage? The humiliation of being thrown out? The months of eating instant noodles and sleeping on a floor mattress? None, I said finally. Everything that happened led me here. To you, to Thomas, to the foundation, to this life. If I hadn't been broken down completely, I never would have discovered how strong I actually was. Christian took my hand. You know what I love most about you? What? You turned your pain into purpose. You could have become bitter, but you chose to become better. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I thought about Charlotte's words from years ago. She'd called me a tree without fruit, incomplete and worthless. She was wrong on every count. I wasn't incomplete, I was whole. I wasn't worthless. I was invaluable to the people who mattered. And I wasn't barren. I'd given birth not just to Thomas, but to a new version of myself. Life hadn't gone according to my original plan. It had gone infinitely better. They called me broken. They'd called me barren. They called me a failure. But I call myself reborn. And that makes all the difference. If this story of transformation and quiet victory had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Sarah stepped off that private jet with her son and husband, returning to the same driveway where she was once thrown out. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more inspiring stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.